In the outskirts of a quiet mountain town in Washington, a young girl, Laura Palmer, was murdered. Tonight on Survive the Night podcast, we're going to be talking about Twin Peaks, Season 1. All right, welcome back to Survive the Night podcast. I am Paul, and with me is Hank.
Hello.
And tonight, we are talking about Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks, the 1990 TV drama made by Mark Frost and David Lynch that has seen a recent revival from Showcase, is it? Here in 2017?
Showtime.
Showtime? Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, this old-ass show came back, and it basically prompted me to want to catch up, watch it with my girlfriend, so we've been watching it. And then Hank decided to watch it as well, and now we're going to be talking complete detail as much as we want and all spoilers and all that stuff about Season 1. So if you're interested in Twin Peaks at all, you should probably watch Season 1. It's only 8 episodes, and you can come back and listen because you're not going to want to miss some surprises if you're new to the series here. So, yeah, Twin Peaks came out in 1990. I was 4 or 5 years old when the show did its original run, but I watched it with my friends when I was about 16 years old, so I have reference as to like how big the show was and all the weird little parodies and satires and like pop culture references that it spawned, but that's kind of hazy. So rewatching this has been kind of like watching it, like knowing what happens, but like watching it for the first time. It's almost like if I had read the synopsis or whatever, because I know the basic plot points of what happens, but like I don't remember all the little details, of which there's maybe too many, arguably.
It's very similar for me. Like I'd watched the show so long ago, I don't really remember any of the details.
Yeah.
And because of how the season 2 ends, I just wasn't into revisiting it for a long time, but now that they've like getting to finish that story or whatever, or tell more of it, I got more interested again.
For sure.
So it seemed like a good time to check it out again.
So for anybody who just needs a quick recap as to what's going on here, Twin Peaks is set in the fictional town of Twin Peaks, Washington, out in the what's it called again? The Northwest, the Pacific Northwest or whatever. The basic logging little town of 50,000 people. I think it's 50,000, the sign says at the very beginning or whatever. Where a well-known popular teen named Laura Palmer, your standard prom queen, like super popular girl that everybody loved, is found dead. And then you slowly find out that the town is absolutely insane and not as normal and quaint as you might think they are at first glance, and everybody you meet in it is kind of a piece of shit in their own way, and it's kind of great. Yeah.
So, and it's like part of what's so important about it is the serialized nature of its storytelling was not such a big thing back then with big TV dramas.
Sure.
Like it's combining tropes that were mostly for like in soap opera stuff at the time with like horror elements into making big, serious, long single story show. Whereas most shows still up to then had been episodic. Like it's kind of set the mold for TV going forward.
For sure. And for anybody who doesn't know David Lynch, like if you know David Lynch, you kind of know what you're probably going to be in for if you've seen his stuff. Some of his stuff, like around that time, would have been when he started calming down a little bit more before he went back off the edge, when he did like Wild at Heart. And Blue Velvet would have been a good almost generation before that, like a good... Oh, maybe it was only like 5 years before that, actually. Blue Velvet wasn't that old. But at this point, he had done Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Dune, Blue Velvet, and Wild at Heart is what came out when he was working on this here. So, yeah, if you've seen any of those or any of his later stuff, like Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive is the big one I always go to for his stuff. He's
Same.
he's a weird dude who likes to pace things very, very slowly, build up a thing, and then just like destroy your mind if possible. So that's kind of what he does here.
A lot of atmospheric horror type stuff of just shit being really unsettling.
Yeah. And I think like why it's notable. I think why it's notable is because this is kind of a basic thing that happens very regularly nowadays. We have to remember that we're talking about a thing that came out like 27, I guess, years ago at this point. Like 27 years ago, it wasn't normal for you to have a daily like soap opera type show that was horrific in nature without like jump scares or being like a horror thing. Like, it's a very quaint standard town where people are having affairs, cheating on each other. There's like a domestic abuse case, just basic things that like might happen in a soap opera, but it's all kind of evil in a weird way. And it's like really disturbing in how basic it is and how it doesn't go too crazy ever, but it keeps it confined in this like you just feel uncomfortable the whole time you're watching it. And like I said, this is a thing that many things do now, but at that time it was very, very new, which is what makes it notable.
The whole style directing, particularly in like the episodes Lynch himself directs, it's like movie style directing, which wasn't normal for TV, and is like becoming more of a thing like in recent years. But even for a long time afterwards, it didn't get picked up on until more recently.
Sure.
But even like this format of like a movie director coming in, developing a TV show, and then kind of other directors and writers stepping in to fill out the full season. That's like a model that's been done over and over again, and this is kind of set that model.
Yeah. And it was big. Like, it was a big deal in pop culture at that time. There's a reason why there's so many references to it in pop culture these days, and like things that have made reference to it. Some of the things off the top of my head for people that play video games, obviously, the reason I got into Life is Strange to begin with at all wasn't because I cared about Max, teenagers, Chloe, or their powers, or any of that shit that was going on. It was because there was this popular girl that everybody seemed to have a connection to in the first episode named Rachel Amber went missing. And that that just like got me in a way that Twin Peaks did.
And that's literally Twin Peaks, basically.
That's exactly Twin Peaks. Then they go away from that, like just as a spoiler for Life is Strange. So that's a bummer, but like they do their own thing and it's very good. But so there's that. The big one also obviously is Alan Wake. Alan Wake basically happens in a town that is Twin Peaks. Like there's a giant lumber mill and all that shit's going on. So that a lot of that Deadly Premonition is Twin Peaks essentially, down to like the characters being exact ripoffs and like bigger versions of the characters in Twin Peaks. Specifically, Francis York Morgan as a blatant ripoff and like exaggeration of Cooper, Agent Cooper.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
we'll talk about Cooper a bit.
Who Shot Mr. Burns was a giant thing for the Simpsons did, and that is very Twin Peaks. I don't know.
Was it The Killing?
Okay.
Used the same sort of tagline of who killed this person for one of their seasons, the US version specifically. I don't know if the Danish version was so much Twin Peaks, but the US version really was.
I just looked up a list of Twin Peaks in popular culture, and there's actually too much to read. There's a reference in almost anything you've ever seen or listened to.
Yes. I would say Twin Peaks was probably more influential than it was even popular in its day. For sure. It's like the amount of other fiction it affected is kind of crazy. Like there's a bunch of Twin Peaks cameos in Seinfeld. Like that happens. It's just fucking everywhere.
It's fucking everywhere, yeah, for sure. And it influenced a lot of people that do horror these days. Like, There aren't direct references to it, but Silent Hill basically they've said doesn't exist without Twin Peaks, because that like inspired how that game feels and like that whole series. And basically any horror game, I'm gonna like just say, is inspired somehow with Twin Peaks. That sense of like foreboding, it works really well for when you're giving agency to a player. So they kind of like all use a lot of things that Twin Peaks did, but
yeah, there's just a lot of base level horror like mood stuff that's in it that it got exposed to a large audience for like in a way that stuff generally doesn't. So
no, for sure
propagates like a pyramid scheme.
Like, just as an example as to how big this was, the first episode, the pilot, which was a feature-length pilot episode of 90 minutes, basically 2 episodes in one, had 34.6 million people in the U.S. viewing it. That's crazy. That is crazy numbers. To get 90 minutes out of that many people is absolutely insane. Unfortunately, those ratings drop dramatically every episode. So that's really a shame. But
it's kind of I mean, that's how TV was then. There were only so like when you're a big network show, people are gonna watch your thing if it's promoted, and then maybe not stick with it if it's too weird.
For sure. And when we get to it, we'll talk about why the ratings are such a shame with how they handled a lot of the second season and what they did with Twin Peaks. But for right now, we're going to talk only about season 1. So in season 1, a lot of time is devoted to you finding out who is involved in this little town here. In fact, most of the first episode is very slow feeling because I think there's actually like 15 different characters they have to introduce or something like that. Like, it's so many characters, and they all play pretty big parts in what's going on in this whole like town, so you kind of have to know who they are. And so the 90 minutes spends a lot of time jumping around with kind of uninteresting stuff going on until you find out how they all connect to each other, I would say.
Yeah, there's also like a lot of unnecessary in quotation mark shots that Lynch establishing his style that help to build the mood that are just weird and not normal for
sure. I mean, the intro sequence is a literal 5 minutes of nothing for the credits.
There's a really long title sequence.
Yeah. And I don't think it pays off. Like, that title sequence, like, I think it's probably there to prep you to just be like, yo, you need some patience, son, because we're going in for the long haul. But, like, watching it these days, there's no reason for it. They're like establishing shots, but like not really.
And it's to make it feel more like a movie day. But even movies these days have gotten rid of title sequences. They just don't do them anymore.
No, totally.
So it feels. If you're gonna watch it, you kind of have to sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna start this and get my snack or whatever ready while this title sequence happens, or fast forward. Maybe, I don't know.
No, totally. You got to be in
title sequence.
Yeah. But yeah, because the characters do play such an important part, I do think it is important, even if you know all the characters and you're kind of revisiting it again, like I did, it's important to watch that first episode. I'll even go ahead and say, in season 1, things don't really start getting too interesting until the end of episode 2 for me. And like, especially episode 3, the way episode 3 ends is like the perfect thing to be just like, oh, okay, this is definitely a Lynch thing going on now. But that build up is so important.
In that I really like that first episode. I really like that pilot.
Okay.
It works for me. And when I sat down to watch it, I know what I'm getting into. So I'm like sitting there ready. And there's small things that do it for me. Like there's the first scene with Lucy as a secretary at the sheriff's office. It's just so fucking normal up front. I really like that. And then they pull the R out of the fingernail, and I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm in. I have to know what happens.
No, there's definitely good stuff crazy. There. Like, you find out later that there's a dude or a thing that they call Bob in this series, and like it kind of ends with the first instance of Bob just kind of like hiding behind a thing. Somebody's having a vision of him hiding, and she just like starts screaming, and that's kind of how that episode ends. It's like, yeah, no, there's good stuff for sure. I'm just saying that,
and I think
it's kind of a hard watch at points.
The other part where I think the early, and not just the first episode, the early episodes are more important is like Cooper's, a lot of his idiosyncrasy is only there in those first episodes, and it starts to wane a little.
Yeah, no, and apparently, I find that that's a problem for me, actually.
Yeah, but and apparently a reason for that is in those early episodes, Mark Frost wrote most of the script, but David Lynch wrote all of Cooper's lines and incorporated things he would say into Cooper's dialogue, which is amazing. Really? Yeah.
Weird. So, yeah, I guess, like, going on with the basic synopsis and characters, Laura Palmer's found dead, so they call in basically the FBI. The FBI gets called in to investigate what's going on in this murder case or whatever in this town, and they send an agent named Agent Cooper, played by Kyle MacLachlan, when like a young Kyle MacLachlan, which is real weird to me still to see, because I know him as old Kyle MacLachlan, and he looks kind of the same, only fresh in this. And yeah, he plays a big city agent that is enthralled with the simplicity of country life, and like, it's a shame they don't keep that. Like, it's a shame that he becomes just kind of a normal dude pretty quickly, because one of the first things that like happens is he's talking on one of his things that he does throughout the series. Actually, he talks to, I'm guessing is like a character. It's a character off screen or like out of this area, probably back home.
It's his secretary.
It's his secretary. Yeah, he like records messages to using a tape recorder that he talks into directly.
Yeah. So it's like he mailing that back to Diane. Like her name is Diane.
Yeah, her name's Diane.
Because he puts stuff in his tape recorder at some point in the series to like for her to send him like earplugs. I'm just like, he's getting these to her like quickly. Like I don't know, but they never really go into how he's getting the
within like a day or something. Like it's quick for sure that he's getting them to him. I don't know either. It's really, really weird, but I really like that they keep that little character quirk about him. But
and you never see Diane. Diane never shows up. It's like when you're watching it at first, you're like, is she talking to a real person? Does she exist? I guess she exists.
And for anybody who's played Deadly Premonition, that's why York Morgan always refers to Zach. It's basically that.
It's literally that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I think a lot of that is just a way that they can write in exposition for him to just say to somebody without him necessarily having to talk to somebody. Like, I think it's just a tool they use for writing gags, I'm guessing, like probably some inside jokes, along with like, I don't know, just that sort of thing. Because there are parts, I think in the final episode of season 1, where he's talking to Diane in a recorder, and there's kind of like some exposition stuff going on there. Yeah, I think it's a cool little gimmick that they did and do. One of the things that it starts off with is he's talking to Diane about how he likes the trees and the smell out there and all that shit. And they kind of get rid of his like love of the outdoors and being in a small town pretty quick. It just becomes like standard fare after a little bit. And I don't know that I like that, because I kind of like him being enthralled with being like a country bumpkin now, essentially. I don't know.
He kind of gets less weird, and they never introduce new weird things for him. He just had those. Right. And then he just becomes a part of the town kind of.
Right. But yeah, he is the main character, I would say, of this show. He is the linchpin in which like the main problem of Twin Peaks is who killed Laura Palmer. He is the person finding the answer that the show focuses on whenever there's a big thing that happens, and this show needs that, because like that's a very big part for this dude to play, because there are so many characters that you need that linchpin character that he plays, and he plays them very well. Like, he's definitely one of my favorites in the series. Every time he's on screen, it's a scene I like, basically, is what I'm getting at with Dale Cooper, Agent Cooper.
And he's also what makes the story feel bigger than just this town of Twin Peaks, because clearly he's gone through stuff and knows stuff that's like that we don't really only get glimpses of, that ties back into what's going on here. Like, like when he pulls the R out of the fingertip, you're just,
that's a big moment.
He's looking for something specific,
and he finds it.
He already knows things. He finds what he's looking for.
That's what makes that so poignant. That moment, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, he really likes coffee, and I can really understand that. So there's that. Yeah. It's hard. It's too hard to go through all the characters. I'll say some of my favorites are, I hated Audrey Horne for the longest time, and then I really started liking her as a character. I think she's kind of cool. She's kind of basic for the first while. You think she's just kind of like the jealous pretty girl whore at school that sleeps around or whatever, but she has like a part to play in this that's pretty big. Her dad and parents and everything to do with the lumber mill is boring, and I hate all that. I hate all of it. I don't care about any of that stuff. And the problem is that that's super important in a lot of the story stuff that happens. So it's really shitty.
Honestly, that stuff is the part that starts to feel the most like a standard soap opera.
Yep.
Like, particularly like
corporate espionage, essentially.
Yeah, with the character of Catherine Martell, who's like the stepsister of the dead husband who used to own it, and now his wife owns it. Like, she's like a classic. She was kind of the biggest star who was on the show at the time, but she gets like soap opera speeches basically, and they feel classic soap opera-y. And I'm less a fan of that because that stuff holds up less in a modern context than it did at the time. At the time, it would have been more normal. Totally.
Yeah, for sure. Ray Weiss is Leland Palmer. I really like. Like, I really like that character. I'm trying to think who else is like I kind of don't care about any of the teenagers, like Bobby, James, Donna, a young Lara Flynn Boyle who looks exactly like an older Lara Flynn Boyle. I kind of don't care about any of them at all. For me, it's all about Dale Cooper, obviously, and anytime he's with the cops, the sheriff. I can't remember the sheriff's name right now, so I feel bad about
Harry
that.
S. Truman.
Right, Harry Truman. Yeah, that's right. As you said, I really like, oh my god, what's her name now? Lucy is
Lucy Moran.
Just
she's
like
so good.
A breath of fresh air every time she's on screen. She's just so normal. Like, she's just such a normal character. She's great. I'm trying to think of other, like, without getting too far into stuff, I don't really like any of the, what are they called? The Baker Street Boys, essentially. Like, this little gang that they formed. I don't care. I think Norma's, like, a decent diner owner character who's just kind of there, but her husband's a piece of garbage. Yeah, I don't know. This is what I mean, is that it's hard to talk about the characters here. Which one's Ed now?
I think he's the one who owns the gas station and has the crazy wife with the eye patch, who's horrible. I hate her.
She's horrible.
She's
yeah, she's really
also
bad.
I really hate the psychiatrist. I hate him the most.
The psychiatrist is Jacoby. He's a piece of garbage. He's a piece of human filth, for sure.
You're supposed to hate him, but I really hate him.
Tommy is great. The tracker dude that works with the sheriff, one of the sheriff's dudes. He's really good. Leo Johnson is the biggest piece of fucking human trash as well. I hate Leo. I fucking hate Leo Johnson. Yeah, basically for the most part, I don't like a lot of the characters because they're played pretty well to what they're supposed to be doing. Like, they're all supposed to be shit, and they are. They're shitlords. And, like, the more you learn about them, you realize, like, oh, this is fucked up. Like, this town is really actually fucked.
Every adult in the series has some secret shit going on, basically.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yep. And the ones that don't are just there trying to find out what happened to Laura. So, like, they're kind of inherently not interesting, but that's kind of a double-edged sword as well, where it's like, some of the characters are interesting, but they're boring, so I don't care when they're on screen anyways. The other characters, basically, if it has anything to do with the investigation of the death of Laura Palmer, I'm in. If it has anything to do with the lumber mill, I'm out, is how that goes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I hate the lumber mill stuff. I think it's terrible. It's terrible. And you're right. It is a sign of the times sort of thing. But it just doesn't hold up. It's boring soap opera bullshit. And, like, weird corporate espionage shit going on that nobody cares about. And I don't know, man. I don't think even back then it did well. Because I remember people saying that, like, that they focused too much in this episode on, like, that stuff. Everybody just wanted to know who killed Laura Palmer. And for anybody listening right now that knows, like, man, that's a weird thing that they did. Anyway, we can't talk about that because that's well into the second season that they find all that stuff out. Yeah, so kind of hard to talk about the characters specifically. All I'm going to say is that Kyle MacLachlan as Dale Cooper is the perfect central focusing point for you as the viewer. And every time he's on screen, it's during a part that I really cared about a lot. And, like, was central to what I like about that show, which is the disappearance and death of Laura Palmer, because that's why he's there. He's not there to find out about the lumber mill. So I really like when he's just doing his job, essentially, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I like how good he is at his job, how ahead of the curve he is on knowing what's actually going on. Like, he's with the audience, even when, like, maybe he, in a normal show, he wouldn't be based on just the stuff that had been on screen.
Yeah.
Like, they do a really good job of, like, he's good at his job. He figures shit out.
For sure.
Although sometimes in weird ways.
I was going to say, let's talk about why he's ahead of the game. So the thing about Agent Cooper is that they don't explicitly say it, but he's kind of like psychic or something. Like, he has connections to another dimensional, like, force or being or something. Because basically what happens in episode 3 is he has a dream that tells him, like, some clues to look for. And as they appear, he finds out more about the case by, like, looking deeper into certain things that other people would miss. And, like, there's a really great scene in one of the episodes where he sets up a glass bottle, like, 20 meters or something like that, 20 yards away, and throws rocks at it anytime a name of a suspect in the town is said, specifically with certain initials in their names. I think it's J or whatever. Anyone with the name of J.
Yes.
So, like, anytime that a rock gets guided, essentially, from his hand to the bottle, depending on, like, the reaction of what happens, that's the most likely suspect that they should be, like, checking out at that time. So, like, one of the dudes is James or whatever, one of the characters that was Laura's secret boyfriend or whatever was going on. And, like, the bottle just kind of, like, taps or whatever. Then he says, like, another name, and then it smashes when he throws it. Like, it's just really good TV bullshit that works
and I like
super well.
I like how just willing to go along with this the rest of the sheriff's department is when he's like brings them out to the woods and just starts explaining to them by showing them a map of Tibet.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
And then later you see Lucy reading a book about Tibet. It's just like,
because to them this is the big city learning guy. Like, he knows what he's talking about, right?
And he's done enough already at this point to show that he's worth believing and trusting.
For sure. And yeah, there's like other little parts where they're at a gun range and the sheriff does well at the shooting. His first deputy, Andy, who's like a fuck up in the show, like sucks completely. And then it looks like Cooper sucked, but then he's like, yeah, I put 4 in each eye. Like he basically hit the same hole like 4 times in a row.
So good.
Yeah. So it's just one of those, everything that show builds that character up so well as like the best version of this thing of like an agent. This is that dude. He's the best of the best. So that show wants you to love him, and they do a very, very good job of it. He's a very lovable, awesome character, and it's really, really weird that he gets shot at the end of the first season. Like, I know why. You got to cash in on that who shot JR, and later on The Simpsons doing who shot Mr. Burns type of thing of the season finale is the main character getting shot and possibly dying. You don't know. You got to let people wonder for the next 3 months sort of thing. So
they gotta struggle in the wind.
Yeah. Twin Peaks didn't invent that. Like I said, it's been done to death at that point. They just did it again, essentially. Actually, they ramp up the last episode quite a bit where they like burn down the lumber mill, or like a part of the lumber mill at least. They shoot a bunch of main characters. Like I think 3 of them get shot. One, and like a bunch of them are in hospital. Like it's a rough time in Twin Peaks. That last episode of a lot
of people are getting backstabbed.
A lot of people. A dude making phone calls to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Telling them stuff that maybe they wouldn't know otherwise or shouldn't know otherwise. And yeah, it's weird. It's a weird episode. And I think for what they wanted to do, which is obviously get people wanting to come back for more, that it worked. I'm sure it worked well. I can look up the numbers right now.
One of the weirder characters in the show that we haven't talked about is Laura Palmer's cousin, who's played by the same actress.
Yeah, I can't remember. Her name is Maddie. I can't remember the actress's name though. But yeah, it's played by Cheryl Lee. That's who it is. So yeah, she just kind of shows up out of nowhere, and people are like, "Hey, it's Laura Palmer," and she's like, "No, I'm Magdalene. I'm Maddie." And it's like, oh, well, it's the same character. Like, it's the same person. Yeah.
The house with Laura's parents. It's like just weird.
Her distinguishing feature is that she has glasses. Like, that's actually the only difference, really. It's really dumb. Yeah.
And they do some good stuff with that.
Oh, totally. They totally do. They really, really, like, make it seem like she might be an actual suspect for weird reasons and stuff in some parts, and they kind of fuck with her in weird ways, and because she looks exactly like Laura, that she like sends some people into breakdowns basically for just existing. No, it's good dumb shit that they did with her. I love it. I really, really do. Yeah. Let's do a quick maybe recap of each episode, because there's only 8. So we talked about the pilot. It's basically a 90-minute thing where you are finding out about Twin Peaks, the characters in it, meeting our main character, and then getting a little taste of what's to come with like a screaming mother at the sight of this weird dude hiding in her house right in front of her that no one else can see. Episode 2 is basically just Cooper continuing the investigation into Laura Palmer's death, specifically with talking to James, the boyfriend, and just kind of like finding out the weird connection between Laura was going out with like this jock dude, and James was like the side kind of Skid Row douchebag boyfriend with the motorcycle that like I guess has a heart of gold. You can't really tell. He's just kind of like a pussy. Like he's not like a badass biker. He's like a heartfelt pussy biker. Yeah. So That's
those
weird.
the interviews with Agent Cooper are really good because he just like instantly knows he's like grilling someone, but he tells the sheriff, yeah, he didn't kill her. It's fine.
Yeah, that's where
Like he
we
just
learn that
instantly
Cooper
knows.
actually can just read body language perfectly, like a lie detector.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's good shit there for sure with Cooper. That's where we also learn about Dr. Jacoby and how he is a fucking creep. So
He's real
there's
bad.
that.
I hate
Yeah.
him. I hate him so much.
And it's also the episode where Audrey kind of steps up and says that, like, or shows that she's actually interested in who killed Laura Palmer as well, although we don't know for what reasons necessarily, because it doesn't seem like she's in mourning like the rest of the friends in town are. She's kind of just like more cold and calculating of a person, using her sexuality to get places, or like trying to use it against like Agent Cooper at some point, and it doesn't work. So we find out a little bit about her there. Episode 3.
And just as
Go
the
ahead.
other thing is these episodes go along, just the more and more people you meet who had a direct connection to Laura, it's like fucking crazy. It's like everyone. She's had so many part-time jobs.
And they're
It's just
weird.
great.
All the connections
Yeah.
are weird. Like, none of them are normal at all. Well, they seem normal at first, like, oh yeah, she was my friend. And then you find out that she was working at a brothel. Like, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird shit. Episode
She was
3
high on cocaine all the time.
is where I think this is one of the lumber mill ones specifically, because that's the one where Audrey's dad's brother, her uncle, the like short dude Jerry, comes into play, and like I hate him, and they're kind of like pushing Leland out because he's in mourning and he's like a liability for investors and stuff like that. So if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure this is the episode where a bunch of that happens for a while. But the big thing about that episode is we get introduced to another FBI agent named Albert Rosenfield, and he is the like complete antithesis of Agent Cooper, where he comes in, he's just a cynical fuck about everything, and just like
Such a prick.
he's just such a
He's there
prick to
do
everybody.
he's there to do the autopsy.
Yeah, he's
And
there
he's
to do
like-
the autopsy, but he's like as
Shits on
good
everyone.
as Cooper. Like when he does the autopsy, he's able to find out all this information that would actually be impossible in real life to find out from a dead body, but it's TV, so that's why like they want to make sure you know that like Cooper is the best at this, but like this guy's also really good. Like they really make the FBI agents seem like way above their pay grade. Like they're very, very good. But yeah, he's a complete dick. And I believe he gets punched in the face by the sheriff after he refers to him as like a dog or something. I don't know. Something like this. He's an
Definitely
asshole.
gets punched. Yes.
The big thing with this episode is it is the episode where Cooper has the dream of a place that you don't find out what it is until much later in the series, so I won't talk about that.
It's the red room. It's a room and it's red.
That's, yeah, we'll call it, it's actually a place. We'll refer to it as such, though, for sure.
Yeah.
In this red room, there is a dancing midget and Laura Palmer, and they speak in weird backwards speak. So, yeah.
Well, it's someone who looks like Laura Palmer, but it's cousin.
Sure.
They say it's not Laura Palmer. They say
Right.
specifically. But
They do say it, but she knows things
Look,
about the murder of Laura Palmer, like sometimes my back or my hands are behind my back or something, or my what is
there are
it?
a bunch
I
of clues.
have my arms behind my back or whatever, and then you find out later that she was like
Yeah.
held from behind and just shit like that.
Yeah, it's doing the dream logic stuff of there's stuff that's said there that in context of that dream doesn't make any sense, but bring it back to the world, it ties to something specific.
Oh, the big thing about that dude's brother showing up is that this is where we get introduced to One-Eyed Jack's, which is the brothel that the one dude owns. So, yeah, that's a big thing too, because that becomes a main area of interest for a long time. Episode 4 is Cooper spending a lot of time trying to figure out what the hell his dream meant, and then finding certain clues, like about a bird and about her arms behind her back being held, and like kind of the murder scene, like where it could be. They get a link with one of the biker bar dudes, and he gets introduced to the Bookhouse Boys in this episode, which is like a ragtag gang of vigilantes, essentially, that they formed, which is super weird.
The secret running it, like, secret group.
Yeah,
just one of those things. Like, this town is weirder than you might have thought.
It's also where we get introduced to Hank.
Yes, that was what I was gonna say.
Which is your character, essentially. So
no, but sure.
Yeah, Hank is the diner lady who owns the diner, Norma, her husband or ex-husband. I can't remember if they're actually divorced.
They're still married.
Okay. He's up for parole and basically is back in town now. So he's kind of a shitty dude, but we don't know why yet. He's just introduced in this episode. And Maddie. This is where Maddie comes in as well.
Yes.
Who becomes important later on, for sure. Episode 5 is where they find the one-armed man that gets talked about from Cooper's dream, and they find out a little bit more about Bob. They call him. Yeah. So it's weird. It's hard. It's hard to talk about knowing what he is, but not spoiling. So yeah. They talk about
the mystery
Bob.
Progresses.
The mystery progresses. It's actually kind of a boring episode, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's a bunch of sawmill bullshit. And
you expect when they find the one-armed man it to be more revelatory than it feels like at the time.
Yeah. It's one of those things that they talk about the one-armed man for like 2 episodes, but then like it can't have a big payoff because they still have like 4 more episodes of this season when they talk about him. So it's kind of a whatever episode, if I'm going to be honest. Episodes,
it's just, and it's hitting the point where the show's been teasing you with this weirder stuff, and it's just not amping it up in this part of the season.
For sure.
It sort of lulls back down.
Episode 6 is the one where they find the murder scene for Laura Palmer, or they look at the murder scene for Laura Palmer. One of the characters, Jacques Renal's cabin, or whatever. Yeah.
It's also there's a character we didn't talk about, just the log lady, and there was like a point early on where she says her log had seen. She just carries around this log, and she says it's seen things, and they finally actually talk to her.
Yeah,
talk to the log.
She's kind of hard to talk about because the reason why she's called Log Lady and she doesn't have a name is because that's all she does. Anytime she's on screen, she's holding a log and doing something weird and then saying that, like, my log knows information, and then everybody's calling her crazy and leaves. That's basically her character. So
she feels like a Seinfeld character.
She does.
Honestly.
No, for sure. She totally does. She's super important to the story. That's the weird thing. Is that she doesn't even have a name. She is super important at points. So, I kind of hate it, honestly. I kind of hate that. I like that she's just there for, like, a weird ambient thing. I kind of hate that she's important.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. In this one, though, this is one where we learn more about Audrey. She gets a job at her dad's, like, jewelry store or something, at the like makeup counter or whatever at his department store. This is the rich guy who's part of the like lumber mill buyout or whatever the hell's going on there that I don't care about. The reason this is big is because she finds out some information about One-Eye Jacks by working there and how they're recruiting girls to be prostitutes or whatever from that location, and that's where like Laura worked. So it's kind of like Audrey becoming more of a character and actually getting somewhere in the investigation and like following the trail. So I thought that was cool that
and it's like
did something with her.
It's like the part of the show where the the teenagers are a little ahead of where the police are in their investigation.
Right.
And they're like separate.
But mainly because they're not
figure out what's
sharing
going on.
information. Like, they knew Laura.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of
And
shitty.
and the cops know about One-Eyed Jacks as a thing that they should check in. They just haven't gotten to it yet.
That's right, yeah. So that's kind of
They
what,
have
like,
they
what
have a
that
poker
is.
chip.
Yes. The next episode 7, is basically the agents catching up, finding out about One-Eyed Jacks with the what the fuck are they called again? The Bookhouse Boys or whatever. They they find, or they dream up a scheme or whatever to go in. Cooper gets a bunch of money from the FBI to throw around like he's a big drug running dude to like infiltrate this drug running business that's going through One-Eyed Jacks that has connections to Laura Palmer. Again, I know it's hard to follow, but like at this point, if you're listening to this, you've seen these episodes because it's too hard to go through all of this in like an hour roughly. So yeah, they're kind of like basically trying to get Renault, is it his name, his last name?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to take him down essentially because he's a known drug runner for Leo. Is it for Leo? Or yeah, he works with Leo Johnson.
Yeah.
The abusive asshole that we didn't really talk about because he's an abusive asshole. That's like his whole role.
And Leo had taken over like Hank's operation when Hank went to prison, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. These are all just like it's the same criminal thing going on that Laura Palmer was kind of like involved in its own weird way, in her own weird way. But like these characters are basically the same part, just like played by different people or whatever, like different characters. So yeah, episode 7 is them finding out about what's going on, trying to take Renault down, finding the bird that in question from the clue in Cooper's dream, and finding a tape with a voice on it saying, what the hell does it say now? It's been a while since I saw it. Like, please stop or something. Basically, like, pointing the finger at Leo as being involved in this murder somehow, or, like, at least being part of there. It's also the episode where they started tying some stuff together, like why Leo had a bloody shirt hidden in his truck was because he, like, hit Renault in the head with a whiskey bottle, and he used it to, like, wipe up the blood from his head when he was like drunk or something. Like, it's one of these episodes where they're starting to tie some stuff together but are making more loose threads for the next season. And then episode 8 is where everything goes to hell. The plan works, they get Renault, and then a bunch of people are in the hospital from different reasons, and they're kind of like waking up at different times or like talking to different people, and the story is being built up a little bit more, and people are like dying, quote unquote, dying, being shot, whatever. A bunch of different shit is going on, and it's really real hard to say why that stuff's important if you haven't been watching the season. Like, it's the wrap up episode. Yeah, the big thing is that Cooper gets shot, basically.
Yeah, Cooper gets shot at the very end. But also the other big thing is fucking when Laura's father Leland kills Renault in the hospital because he thinks that's who killed Laura. Yeah.
But that has big implications in season 2 as well, which we'll find out when we talk about that. That's a basic rundown, though, of all the stuff that goes on. Of course, there's a lot of shit that goes on behind what we talked about, but that's the episode. That's the big stuff that happened in the episodes, essentially. Let's talk about why we think this is good or bad, like what type of personal connection we formed with it. And I think the easiest way for me to start this conversation off is that, of course, as I said, I've seen this before, I know what's happening, but I was a little too young to appreciate a lot of the writing and different like character motivations and all that sort of stuff. I was 16 or 15, like I was about half of my age now. And so a lot of that stuff didn't resonate with me as well. The pacing was harder for me when I was younger because I wanted more action-y stuff. So I got bored a lot easier. The big stuff that happens still hit as hard, which was kind of interesting, that even though I knew they were happening, I didn't remember exactly when and where they fit into the story. I thought were like real cool, so it was nice seeing that again. But I gotta say that as of growing up, I was super into horror, and I feel like a lot of that is because I watched Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks was one of the first like real horror shot and writing type slow burn stuff that I've ever seen. I didn't really start getting into like more horrific stuff until I was probably about 17, 18, maybe even my 20s. So I think this series kind of subconsciously really got me like prepared for a lot of what we would see coming out and what I saw coming out and stuff, and of course all the different references that everything else that I liked made to it. It's just one of those things that it's kind of always been this like big thing that's always been in the background of who I am as a person when I watch media stuff, specifically horror stuff, but like I didn't realize it until I rewatched it and was just like, this is why I like that thing, because this did it when I was like forming opinions about stuff, essentially. Yeah. Interesting. So it's kind of interesting to revisit.
Yeah. I mean, I like revisiting it. For me, it's seeing the historical impact on it is a big part of it for me.
Sure.
Like I like seeing how great TV has developed over the years. I really like how it builds a mystery when it's doing it well.
Sure.
And how it introduces just bizarre elements, because there's so many shows that try to do that stuff and this does it really friggin' well. It's like shows a model that I don't feel like, even when shows are like trying to capture what Twin Peaks do well, I feel like they miss it a lot of what worked about it.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure. Yeah. Just the way it does intrigue in terms of like teasing out little things and like how bizarre what's actually happening is. Like, it's just really good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it went on to do like, I think Lynch went on from this, took a lot of lessons he learned from doing this stuff and made his stuff better as well. Like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway has that like slow pacing with the creepy atmosphere the whole time, never letting go, and then a weird payoff. Like, yeah, I think he took a lot of lessons from this. So,
yeah, and this is definitely more accessible than those movies are.
Totally, without a doubt. Yeah, totally. All right. I guess the last question is, Twin Peaks was a dramatic horror type thing from the 90s that focused on building up characters in this little town and kind of like exposing their secret shady lives and all that stuff. Do you think it did it well so far?
I think
season 1 anyway.
I think it does the mystery really well.
I
think some of the stuff that's happening in the town feels a little too standard soap opera-y with all the betrayals and all the sleeping together.
You think it could do it without
feels a little more dated? I just the way it's executed feels a little more its time than the mystery stuff, which feels way ahead of its time and just fucking great. So I think it does the mystery stuff better than it does the other stuff. They obviously play together, but I would say like the stuff with the lumber mill is weaker.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I definitely agree. I think what it does well is the mystery, and I do think that's the main thing that they try to do. I mean, the whole reason there's a show is because Cooper comes in to investigate the mystery. Otherwise, all this shit is just happening and nobody cares. So that is definitely the focal point. When we come back eventually to talk about season 2, man, that's gonna be a hard conversation because that goes so off the rails with what this does well. But I'm gonna say overall, season 1 is making like this weird kind of mystery thriller serialized thing, especially for the 90s. I think it did it very well. I really, really enjoyed it. It gets you into this world that they're building. It's slowly building it with like you as the passive viewer just kind of coming along for the ride, and then it ends off the season with a literal bang and just kind of cuts it off, making you want more. So yeah, I'd say it does it very, very well myself.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, so that concludes our talk about Twin Peaks season 1. We hope you enjoyed it so far. We will be back to talk about season 2. That might be a two-parter, because season 2 is kind of 2 seasons, weirdly enough. The Laura Palmer stuff finishes halfway, and then it becomes a different thing, basically.
Yeah, and that's where the ratings tanked.
Yeah, and that's why it's going to be hard to talk about season 2 as a whole if we don't. Because I think we need to talk about the Laura Palmer stuff as one separate entity, and then the Twin Peaks stuff as another, if that makes sense. I mean, for people that know, that makes sense. But
yes.
Yeah.
Heads up.
Heads up, exactly. So, yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.